Dr. Hidden Gemara. We are up to the second line on the top of the Kufay Aleph. Rabbi Bar Huna Masni Law Begavri Bimis Askin. Rav Huna cleared the same. Rabbi Bar Huna cleared the same shiloh as we had yesterday. We have an animal that's partly in and partly out of the Azara, but he was discussing it when there was the people involved. And Rashi explains. Apologize. Rashi explains. Oh, I'm sorry, Rashi a little bit later. So Rashi says, so the Gemara says, Rabbi Barafuna Masla Gavri, asking boy Chamisha B'nei Adam. There were 5 people that were lifting and transporting the Horam HaNisrafim, or the Sirim HaNisrafim. They were transporting them to Mechutz L'Machane. The Nov Kutla, so 3 people have already crossed over the threshold into the Chutz L'Azara, onto Har Bayis, Upashilu Trey, and there's 2 people left inside. My Basar Roiv Misaskin Naslinan, Oy Basar Behema Naslinan. Do you look at the Roiv of the Guf of Behema, whether it's in the Azar or not, and that's when the Tuma is triggered? Or do you look at the Roiv of the people carrying it? If they're outside the Azar, then we consider everyone outside the Azar. Now let's see Rashi. Oy Dilma Basar Behema, the Michbirba, the Hecha the Isa Shadina the Afal Gav, the Lav Ruba the Behemi, Elapalga. Even though there's only even though there's only I'm sorry, this is going under Friedrich Shtickle of whether or not you connect the Roiv to the Miyat. So I apologize. Because up to the Maravater. He just learned the Shaila is, do you go Basar the people when you determine whether Roiv the Behema is in the Azar or not, or do you go Basar the Behema itself? And the Gemara answers with a tegu. Boy Rabbalozah. So Rabbalozah has a new Shaila. Parim Usir Manisrafin Shiyatsu V'chazru. They left the Azar, which means they would have triggered Tuma, but then they were brought back into the Azar. Ma what's the halacha? And as Rashi says, Kasal Kadaita, at this point, Le'inyan Tumas Begodim Shel Elu Shoitzium Kamivoyle. We know that whoever took out the animal, according to one sheet in our Mishnah, their Begodim become Tami, they become Tami Latami Begodim. So the Shaila over here is, do we say that it's totally in the people carrying or in the behemoth? Okay, Gavaltik. Zog to Gemara. Take variables are parim u'shir b'nasham shiyotzu v'chazru. I'm sorry, I got a little bit mixed up. Shiyotzu v'chazru now. They left Azara and then they went back in. Do you say once it's mitama, or no, it went back in now? My mi amrinan kiva de nafkalahu it's milahu. Once it left, it's mitama. So that means if people handle this poor, they're begun to become tamei. I don't want to keep the other. Or do you say, since the animal now is back inside the Zara, it's as if the animal never left. Now, this is a very fascinating shaila, because let's think about this. You have people that carried the behemoth chutla Zara. They became tamei, and their begodim became tamei. Now, by bringing the animal back, but suddenly their begodim should become tahor, their body should become tahor, is going back into the Azor, is that like going into a mikveh? What mitar? And that Tosfos is kasha. So let's look at Tosfos. Oy dilma even the other. Here's Bekhodris, the Maboila in Tumas Begodim, Shal Elu, the Shiloh is like Tumas Begodim. The Kasha, Atu Mechitzos Azara, Mikvah Tahira. Is that what the Mechitzos Azara are? It's a Mikvah Tahira? They give it Nitmu, Mi'atarim. Once they became Tameh, just because they go back into the Azara, how did that make them Torah without any type of going to the mikveh? Therefore, Tosfos doesn't like to say that that's what the Shiloh is about. The Shiloh is not whether someone who already became Tameh will automatically lose his Tuma. No. The question is, now that it's back inside, if someone touches the animal now, the Dilma Kivin the Yotza Bechutz, Afal Gav the Chozru, Hanageh Befnim Tameh, maybe even though now the animal is inside, but since the animal was at one point out of the Azara, and that's where it's going anyway, get burned, maybe the behemoth could still be Mitama. The Gemara will then explain the tenets. So Zok Tahel the Gemara. Toshma. Amar Abar Bamamal Toshma. Are you Saibel Oisan Bemoitois? What if, like our Mishnah states, they were carrying the animal on moitois? They were carrying the animal on sticks. So you have people in the front and people in the back, similar to the way Klal Yisrael, the Meraglim carried out the fruit from Eretz Yisrael. So Yotze Chutz L'Chaymas Hazar, or Hushanim Yotze Chutz L'Chaymas Hazar, the people in the front have already crossed the threshold into the Hazara. The Achreinim Lo Yotzu, but the people in the back had not yet left Hazara. So the halach is Harishonim Sheyotzu Chutz L'Chaymas Hazara Metamin Begodim. The Rishonim, the first group in front that left, they're Tamei, the Begodim are Tamei. The Achrayim, but the people on the inside, Ein Metamin Begodim Machiyetu. So Zog Gemara, the Isol Kedaita. If you're going to say that once the animal went out, we consider anybody behandling it Tamei, even if they're inside. Isol Kedaita Kim the Nafke Lahu Itmu Hanach. If you hold once it goes out, it's Tamei. Well, then Hanach the Ikar Gavoid Tamei. Even the people on the inside should be Tamei as well, as Rashi says. Hanach the Ikar Gavoid Nami Nitmu To Yitzia Lidin Tumas Begodim Beporim Ksiva. So right off the bat, the Gemara is rejecting the Shiloh we had earlier from the Shiloh we had earlier, right at the beginning from Arfuna, that maybe it's totally in Roy Vanoshim. The Gemara is saying we hold it's totally the behemoth itself. So Oibazon, the Baal the behemoth itself has already left the Azara. So therefore, when they are feeling the command of Pirkin, Loimerlach, Kivin Shiyotza Par Chutz Lamachana Achas. Just later today, we're going to learn that once the par itself leaves the Azara, Mitama Begodim, it will be Mitama Begodim. Aval Bidle Nofel Gavri. Even if people didn't leave yet the Azara, they're still holding on to the back stick. Nevertheless, once the animal is chus Azara, someone carrying it, even though he's standing in the Azara, should be done it. Elulav, Yishum do Amar, the Hadar, the Choshgein Elu, Shemachzarim V'Oimdim, Sharei Lo Yotzu. What do you have to say? If the fact that the Mishnah says that the people who are inside remain tar, even though Roiv the animal is outside, must be that going back in is Matariu. And that's why these people are tar, because they never left. Amravina, the Tizbra, is that what you think Pshat is? The Torah says that the people who carry and who burn the Parah, they become Tamei. And then the Torah says that after they become Tamei, they may return back into the Azar. But the problem here is these people never left. So, Vais Tachlis on this pasuk, the Torah is telling us that in order for someone to become Tamei from handling the Shreifa of these Purim, they have to physically be outside the Azara. The whole right, the pasuk says that after your Matar, when you became Tamei, you're not in the Machna. Like Ella, you know what you have to say? Going to Nikiti law biblikalsi. And Rashi explained to us, this is a fascinating shayla. What happened was, they took the animal out of the Azara. Of course, everybody who handled it became Tamei. Then they took the animal for some reason back into the Azor. And new people came who never became Tamei, and they were standing outside the Azor. And they had sticks, and with the sticks that they're going to extend outside from outside the Azara inside the Azara to lift up the animal and pull or raise or somehow remove the animal with their sticks, but they were physically standing outside the Azara. So that's the Shaila. They are standing outside the Azara. So they check off the requirement of Achayove Elamachina. This Behema, although it's in the Azara right now, it was once out of the Azara. So the Gemara Shaila is, do you say once it left the Azara, it could be Metama? So these people standing outside with their sticks, lifting the Behema up to bring it out, they're going to become Tamei. Or do you take even the other, once the Behema went back into the Azara, the Behema is no longer Metama. Again, another fascinating Shaila. Zok to Gemara weiter. Hanarabanan. Parim upara useir mishtalech. So we have the parim and the srachim, we have the para aduma, we have the seir mishtalech. The loch is hamishaleach or sarfon v'mitzion. The people involved in taking them out to burn them, mitama begadim. They all become tamei tumas begadim, meaning they're tamei and they're mitama their begadim, which means they become avatuma and they make their begadim into a rishon. The hein atzman ein mitamin begadim. But the animals themselves, if you touch the animal themselves, you don't become tamei with a avatuma that you can mitama begadim. You'll just become a rishon of tuma. So carrying the animal and preparing it for the shreifa or whatever triggers that tuma, that makes you have a tuma chamura. Actually, even though you didn't touch the animal, even though you're carrying it with a stick, merely touching the animal doesn't create that same level of tuma. Avo metamin oichlin umashkin, but it's a lower level of tuma. It's a rishon tuma. A rishon tuma that touches oichlin umashkin will make the oichlin umashkin into a sheni tuma. Zog to Gemara. Bishlama l'Rab Meir. Bishlama, according to, I'm sorry, I skipped. So that's the sheet of Rab Meir. The Chacham say, para uparim mitamin oichlin. Yes, the para and the parim, if they touch any food, they'll make them tummy. Because they're dead, they're shechted, they're already kuchshel akabel tumah. However, seir mishtaleach, which is alive while they're carrying it out, einoi mitama. You know why it can't be mitama? Because it's not a dover that can become tummy. Shehu chai. The seir mishtaleach is alive until they throw it down the mountain. V'chai einoi mitama tumas oichlin umashkin. So this is a very, very important machlokes, because we first have to understand what is the source of this tuma. Now we have a loch of asarif asapara yichabis begadav. True, but what is the source that it should have a tumas oichlin? If something touches it, it becomes tummy, becomes a sheni, becomes a rishon or sheni. What's the source of this tuma? So we're going to soon see that according to Rab Meir, it's a new magical source that could make anything tummy, even a live animal. It's a new type of tumah that defies all the laws of tumah. On the other hand, the Rabbanan say that it's not quite that way. V'haraya, he holds the Sher Mishalech, which has no shaykhs to being a davar tameh, will not be able to come tameh. We're going to need to understand what is the source and the reason for this, what I would call spontaneous tumah. It becomes tameh, something touches it, it makes it tameh, and according to Rab Meir, it could even be metama, a live animal which has no shaykhs to becoming tameh. So let's have a look. Bishlam Rab Meir, I understand where Rab Meir's shita comes from, that there's this new magical tumah that works to make even a davar chai into a tameh, which defies all the rules of tumah, because of a chiddush that was taught to us. The Tana of Bishmuel. The Tana of Bishmuel. It says in the pasuk, "Al kol zera zerua," and we learned that tumas royim Tuma Zroim, fruits, vegetables, things they cannot become Tuma Tuma Cyclin unless they were first Huksher Lakabal Tuma by coming into contact with one of the seven mashkas represented by the Rosh Tevis Yad Shachatam. It's Yain, Davad, Shemin, a whole bunch of different mashkim that have to come in contact with a plant before it could be Makabal Tuma. Now, just to be clear, once something becomes Huksher Lakabal Tuma, you have an apple that rain fell on it, so now it's Huksher Lakabal Tuma. That doesn't mean it's tummy. It's just royal Lakabal Tuma. Here we're talking about spontaneous Tuma. How does it become tummy, this animal that was shechted? So Zog to Gemara. Bish Tomer of Meir Hotek Rabbi Shmuel. The ton of the Rabbi Shmuel, Akol Zeres Rua, Maz Royim, Shein Soifed Li Tamei, Tuma Chamura, Utrichen Action. Zroyim will never be Metama Tuma Chamura. The definition of a Tuma Chamura is they become an Abba Tuma, and then they can be Metama other things that make him into a Rishon. But we know, Oichol Mashkin, the most Tuma they could have is a Tumas Rishon. So Maz Royim, She'ein Soifan Litami Tuma Chamura. They have no future to be Metama with a Tuma Chamura. And the Torah teaches us, Utzrich and Hechsher, in order for them to be able to even be a Kabul Tuma, they have to come in contact with one of the seven mashkin, Afkal. So too, any other item that you could find, She'ein Soifan Litame Tuma Chamura, if it's something that's not destined to ever become a Tuma Chamura, Tzrich and Hechsher would require Hechsher, would have to come into contact with a mashka before it could even be Makabal Tumah. But it very clearly excludes a whole class of Tumas. Yotza Nevela Saiftar. What is a Nevela Saiftar? If you touch a Nevela Saiftar, the Torah doesn't talk about any Tumah that it has. The only Tumah that it has is if you swallow a Nevela Saiftar, if you actually swallow Kazayas of a Nevela Saiftar, as it goes through your base abliya, it's matamayu. It's an unusual, unique, exclusive type of tumah that applies only to nevelas oiftar. So nevelas oiftar, if you eat it, it's going to be matamayu a tumah kamura because it will make you into an ava tumah. So a nevelas oiftar will not be governed by the rule that it needs hechsher because it's soifai li tamei tumah kamura. So Yotza Nevelas Oiftar Shesoifa Li Tamei Tuma Chamura. It will eventually be able to make somebody into an Av, and therefore the ain't Tzrich Hechsher. It doesn't need Hechsher, and therefore we say it's automatically Tamei with a Tumas Oichlin. So just like what we're saying about the Param on the Srafim, or Serum on the Srafim, and the Serum Mishtaleach, that since they're eventually going to be Metama Tuma Chamura because they're going to be Metama their handler with an avatuma, and therefore merely touching them makes you tame, which is like tumas oichlin. That same rule should apply equally to the nevelas haftar. It fits right into that category, even though it didn't touch any tuma. But we say it has its own spontaneous growth of tuma without any type of hechsher, and anything that touches it will become tame tumas oichlin. That explains the sheet of Reb Meir, who says that this applies equally to a seir mishtaleach. Elul Rabbanan, according to the Rabbanan, who don't say that there's this magical rule that creates a tuma because it doesn't apply to the seir mishtaleach. So let's try to understand who do the Rabbanan hold like? He is the Tana Devei Rabbi Shmuel. If they hold of the Tana Devei Rabbi Shmuel, that tells us that since it's Soifer L'Tamei Tuma Chamura, it has its own new magical tuma. Well, then afilu seir mishtaleach. The seir mishtaleach should also be a party to this magical tuma of Kol Dover Shesoifei L'Tamei Tuma Chamura. And he lastly, and if he doesn't hold over Rabbi Shmuel's rule, well then afilu para upara minola. So why does the Rabbanan say they don't hold over Rabbi Shmuel? So where is this brand new tuma generated in the para and the para? That if you touch them, Oichel Mashkin will become tummy. Zog to Gemara, the teretz is as follows. Sure, the Rabbanan hold over Rabbi Shmuel, but they interpret Rabbi Shmuel in a different way, as follows. Yosy Ravdini Amar, Omri b'Marava. They said in Marava, Utzrichin hechsher tuma mimokamacher. Rabbi Shmuel's halacha that says that something that's soifer the tamei tuma chamura is huchshel kabel tuma it makes it hukshul kabel tuma. It's as if it came in contact with water, but it still needs to get tuma from somewhere, as Rashi says. Amri b'marova. Tzrichin hechsher tuma b'makam acher. How the Tana Dver B'Shmuel Hachikamer. The Rabbanan learn Pshat in Rabbi Shmuel a little bit differently, as follows: Kol she'ein tzayfai litamei tuma chamura. If it's not eventually going to be metama a tuma chamura, like a regular fruit, sarach hechsher tuma mimakam acher. Not only does it need to come in contact with water, but it also has to become tummy afterwards. It doesn't become spontaneously tuma. The water will make it a chushel kabel tuma, and then it has to receive tumah by touching a sheretz or something. Shigu b'sheretz, ibn avela. Below she tamu me'elav. It's not spontaneous tumah that just pops out on its own. Aval misha soifei l'tamei tumah chamura. But the items on our list, like the parim and the parais, that will eventually become tumah chamura, ain't tzarech liga b'tumah. They don't have to touch tumah, and therefore umetamei tumas oichlin me'elav. They will spontaneously have their own tumah that can be metama tumas oichlin. K'lein paro parim. Aval chazi l'tumah mias be'alma ba'ina. But it has to be something that could be an oichel. It wouldn't apply to Balechaim. So basically, the Rabbanan agreed to Rabbi Shmuel's rule. Avadi, there's something called a spontaneous tumah, but the spontaneous tumah still follows the rules of the normal global rules of tumah, and that is that a dover chai cannot be the kabel tumah. So therefore, it explains perfectly why the Rabbanan agree with her mayor that the parim and the srafim, musir and the srafim, and the paraduma, they all have this spontaneous tumah. But that's because they're dvorim that are meichalim, so they can become tamei. But a davar chai, which has no shaykhs to becoming tamei, that is not included in the rule of Rabbi Shmuel of kol shesoifai v'tamei tumachal. Okay, beautiful. Zok to Gemara Vayter. Boy Rabbalos. Rabbalos are another shayla. Parim usirim hanisrafim. These animals, these korbanos that we're referring to, Mao sheyitmu oichlenu mashkin bifnim kibachutz. When do these animals first receive their tumah chamura? When they leave the azar, as we've been learning, right? After leave the azar, the Mishnah was talking about it, the half in, half out. But they only become tumah once they leave the azar. While they're in the azar, they're not tzayfel the tumah chamura, because the tumah only comes when they leave the azar. But eventually, it is going to come. So therefore, the Gemara wants to know: do they have their tumas oichlin, this magical tumas oichlin of the Devei Rabbi Shmuel? Do they already have it while they're in the azara after the animals were shechted? So Nochama, parim usir manasrafin mao sheitmu oichlin umashkin b'fnim in the azara kibachutz. Do you say mechusar yitzia k'mechusar ma'asadami? Do you say that since you didn't take it out yet, still in the azara, so there's a big impediment to stop this animal from being considered soifei l'tamei tumah chamura? It's missing an integral step that will definitely not happen on its own. Oiloi, or no, maybe it doesn't make a difference. Since it's destined, eventually it's going to be taken out of the azara to be burned, we consider it like it's already soifei l'tamei tumah chamura. Tosfos asks a very fascinating kasha. If you're going to say that this animal, right after its shechita, is already going to be metama tumas oichlin with this spontaneous tumah, well, then why won't it be metama the emurin? When as soon as you shech the animal, the meat that we're saying has this spontaneous tumah is connected to the animal, connected to the emurin. So it's going to pass on the emurin. So how does that work? So Tosfos is moida fazoivait. If it wasn't even chopped up yet, that's another step removed from bringing this animal out of the azar. So that for sure would be considered k'mechusar ma'isa, and the tumah wouldn't be chal. But after the pieces are separated and the meat's isolated, it's only there where the Gemara clears that maybe it's not k'mechusar ma'isa. Basar the boy had posh. After the shaila was cleared, they were pushing the shaila. Mechusar yitzia k'mechusar ma'isa dami. Period. Mechusar yitzia, that's a big step, and the animal hasn't left yet the azara. It doesn't have the tumah chamura, and it does not have even the tumah kala of tumas oichlin. So Reb Abba bar Shmuel asked the following question of Reb Chia bar Abba, and he wanted to know as follows: Nevelas oif tar l'Reb Meir. Reb Meir holds Nevelas oif tar has this magical tuma. Since it's toivel l'tama tuma chamura, it has its own tuma soichlim. Maushi tama b'kazayis. Now here's a very fascinating question over here. Because normally tuma soichlim only applies if the shear of the food is a kabeya. If the shear of the food is a kazayis, it cannot be makabel tuma, and they can't give off tuma, according to Tosfos. According to Rashi, it could be makabel tuma, but it can't give off tuma. But the question is, can it give off tuma if it's less than a kabeya? You might say, how is that possible? Tuma's oichlin only works by a kabeya. True, that's if you're following the normal rules of tuma. And for instance, a shir mishtalech, which is a dover chai, you'll say it doesn't have this rule of spontaneous tuma because it's not in the parsha of tuma. But once you're saying that even a dover chai is also subject to this magical tuma of seifi l'tamei tuma kamura, so then maybe even it could even defy the halachas of tumas oichlin. Sure, normally tumas oichlin to become tamei, to be mitama, needs to be a kabeya. But this magical tumas oichlin that even goes on a shir mishtalech, which is a live animal, it should also work for a small shir of kazayis, which normally is not mitama tumas oichlin. So Zok Gemara, we have to analyze what is the scenario over here with this Nevelas Oif Torah. Normally, people don't eat Nevelas Oif Torahs. So why do we say it's also l'tamei tuma chamura if no one's going to eat it? So Zok Gemara, the machzor ara lo tiboilo. If you had a piece of Nevelas Oif Torah that was sitting on the floor, that's not also l'tamei tuma chamura because nobody's eating it. The nagad pimul, if he already has it in his mouth, he is eating it already. Again, lo tiboilo. That's mamish sofer l'tamei tuma chamura. For sure, it will be mitama b'chazayis. Kita boilach, the nokit lo b'yodei. He's holding it in his hand. He might eat it, he might not. Do you say mechusa kreva k'mechusa ma'isidomi? Do you say this is not also l'tamei tuma chamura because it's not yet in his mouth? Or maybe since you have it in your hand and you're going to put it into your mouth, maybe it's also l'tamei tuma chamura. Zok to Gemara weiter on daf kuf hei beis. Oops. The Baltic. Mechusa kreva lav k'mechusa ma'asidom. So the Gemara paskin that mechusa kreva is lav k'mechusa ma'asidom, meaning it's not k'mechusa ma'isa, and therefore it will be metama because ayis. I'm going to prove to you that according to Rav Meir, it's not metama because ayis. Because the Mishnah says as follows: Shloisha asar dvarim never b'nevelas oif Torah. There were 13 interesting halachas that were said about nevelas oif Torah. And this is one of them. Tzricha machshava. First of all, you have to have machshava. Rashi, the Mefarshim tell us means that most people aren't going to eat a nevelas oif Torah. It's not a pleasant thing to eat, so it's not considered an oichel unless you had specific kavanah that you were planning to eat it. But the ain't tzrich and hechsher. It doesn't need hechsher because it still has this magical tuma of soifei l'tamei tuma chamur, and u'metama tumas oichlin b'kebetzu. It will be metama tumas oichlin, but only a kebetzu, not a kazayis. So Zok Gemara, my lover Meir, he pasha. This is a Meir who holds on this magical tuma, and what does the Brayso say? Only kabetza. So we just paskin mechusa kreva lavka mechusa ma'isidomi, and this magical tuma of seifel l'tama tuma chamura by the nevelas oif Torah should make it be mitama even because is. But the Brayso, which is pashtus, speaking in Rav Meir, is saying you need a kabeya. Zok Gemara loy meichadesi. Maybe it's going according to the Rabbanon. And according to the Rabbanon, that everything follows the normal rules of tuma. It makes sense why it's a kabeya. But you cannot say that this brisa that we just quoted is the Rabbanan. Because Vakatani Reisha, Shricha Machshava, Be Shricha Hechsher. It says Shricha Machshava. It does not need Hechsher. Uman Shamas Lehai Svara. Who tells us the Svara that ain't Shricha Hechsher, that it becomes Tomei by itself? Who is the one who says that Svara? That's Reb Meir. So the ratio of Meir, Sefer Nami Reb Meir. So if the ratio of this Mishnah is Reb Meir, it makes sense to say that the Sefer is Reb Meir as well, when he says that you need to have a Shir Kabetza to be Mitama. Zot Gemara B'Deir, who said? Hachadisa B'Chadisa. Maybe the ratio is Reb Meir, and maybe the Sefer is going according to Rabbanan. Correct Gemara, but the next case is also Reb Meir. But the Ketani Sefer Shchitasa, Umekilasa, Umelikasa, with the Harris Trefasa Mitimasa. If you shecht or if you make malika to a bird, even though the bird is treifa, it will still make it ois nevela and it won't be tummy. That's the shita of Reb Meir. Man shamas lehaisvar, Reb Meir, right? We learned this in the Mishnah earlier in the Masechta. Reb Meir holds that the shchita or the malika, even if a treifa, will be mitared, right? We learned from a behemoth that the shchita of a treifa will be mitared. So, are you telling me the ratio of a Sefer of Meir? The first case of the Mishnah and the last case of the Mishnah is of Meir, Umitziyas or Rabbanan, and the middle case is going according to Rabbanan. It's much more likely to argue that it's all of Meir. So, that's exactly what I'm saying. Ratio of Sefer of Meir, Umitziyas Rabbanan. So, therefore, you don't have a raya that even according to Meir, with his magical Tuma, that it would be a kabeya. In fact, we can stay with our psak, and it'll even be mitama to us oichlin because eyes. Gewalt. Amar le Rav Hamnuna Rav Zera. Rav Hamnuna told Rav Zera, Loi teisa v'karach, don't relax. Don't sit on your legs. Don't relax on the Amar Sli Hamilsa until you could answer this shayla for me. He was challenging him. Nevelas oiv Torah Rav Meir. And Nevelas oiv Torah Rav Meir, moinin la risha v'sheni or ein moinin risha v'sheni. Now normally, a Nevelas Oiv Torah, we said, has this spontaneous halacha of Tumas Oichlin. So if it's Tumas Oichlin, that means that if something touches it, it will become a Rishon. So this will be a Tumas Oichlin. So it would be Mitama something with a Tumas Sheni, and it would go on. If it's Truma, it could be Shlishi, and if it's Kachim, it could be Revi. So the question is, maybe that we say that it gets this Tumas Oichlin, is it Moin Rishon Sheni? It's a regular Tuma that could continue on, passing that Tuma on from one item to the next. Or Ein Moin Rishon Sheni, or maybe it's just the Tuma on the first thing that it touches, but after that the Tuma does not go any further. Omerlei. Kol heichal, the matama odon b'maga. If it can be matama an odon b'maga, then moinin by rishon v'sheni. So anything that has a din of an avatuma, that can be matama a person, to make a person into a rishon, that will be able to continue on making a sheni and a shlishi. So therefore, if something had an avatuma on it and it touched something, it would make it into a rishon. If that thing touched another thing, it would make it into a sheni, and so on and so forth. But if it's not a tumas avatuma, and if someone touches it, he won't become tummy. Even though it can be mitama something else, but it doesn't go further. It can only be mitama one additional item. So that is their shiloh. This tuma of Nevelas Oiv Torah, that we're saying has this magical tuma, that it's tummy without hechsher and without coming into contact with anything else. Is it only one level of tuma, or will it continue? That is the shaila that Rav Hamnuna told Rav Zera. Is it going to be tummy or not? And Rav Zera answered very simply with a very clear answer. It depends on if it's mitama adam. Anything that can be mitama adam continues on level after level of tuma. Something that can become mitama tumas adam will only be mitama the first thing that it touches. Beautiful. So now Reb Zera asked Shaila Rabami Barchia. It says in the Mishnah, Chibur oichlin ayidei mashkin chibur l'tuma kala vein chibur l'tuma chamur. What happens if you have two pieces of nevela? Now, in order for a nevela to be metama, it has to be a shir kazayis. So what if you had on one plate one piece of nevela that was a half a kazayis, another piece of nevela that was also a half a kazayis? So unless they're mitzaref to each other, they're not going to be tamid. They're not going to be metama. But there's liquid that's there's a stream of a liquid that's joining these two pieces. So because of that, now we can look at it as if it's one piece. So in such a case, where you look at it as one piece, the Mishnah says, for a tuma kala, it's a chibur, vein chibur l'tuma chamura. What does that mean, Dr. Rashi? Vein chibur l'tuma chamura l'tamei odom v'chelim v'tamei lo yidan. Rashi doesn't know the reason. Normally, an nevela is an avatuma, and to an avatuma, it could make a person into a rishon. If a person touches it, he'll become tummy. If a keli touches it, he'll become tummy. And then if the tumas rishon, like the person with the keli touch it, he could touch another piece of food, and the food will become tummy sheni. That doesn't work that way. Even though it does combine these two chatzis to make them into chazayis, it won't have the effect of making it into an avatuma. But it only makes it into a tuma kala, which means it could be metama oichlun umashkin, but it couldn't be metama person or keli. So chibur l'tuma kala and chibur l'tuma chamur. Now the question is, moinin by rishon v'sheni or ein moinin by rishon v'sheni. This interesting tuma, where you have two chatzis of nevela that are combined with a stream of liquid, it could be metama, it can make something into a sheni. Well, but will that sheni continue making something into a shlishi? Yes or no? So Zok Gemara Amalei, the same rule. If it would have been able to be Matama Anodam, which clearly the mission says this cannot do, only then would it be able to be Matama Rishon V'Sheni and continue on Tuma from level to level. But Ein Matama Adam, Ein Moinim by Rishon V'Sheni. About it. Zok Gemara about it. Yoto Elu Velu. Once all the parties carrying this animal have left Azara, and now everyone's completely out of the Azara, everybody's tummy. You know what I mean? How do you know that the moment they leave the Azara, they become tummy? The Tana Rabbanan. La'lonu Omer chutz l'gimel machnes. When the Torah is talking about on one of the Purim HaNesrofim, it says beferish that it's chutz l'shalosh machnes. It says it by the Par Koil Mashiach. It says beferish chutz l'shalosh machnes. So Zok to Gemara, Minon Amili, the Tana Rabbanan la'lonu Omer chutz l'gimel machnes by the Par Koil Mashiach. Kan l'machnachas, but by the Purim of Yom Kippur, it just says it goes chutz l'machna. It doesn't say chutz l'shalosh machnas. So how do you know that? And we know it's the same. We know by Yom Kippur also it's chutz l'shalosh machnas. So why does it only say l'machnachas by Yom Kippur? L'omer lach kiven sheyotza chutz l'machnachas metama begodim. To teach you that once it leaves even one machna, it's already metama begodim. So even though they're going to have to take this chutz l'shalosh machnas to its final place to burn, the tumah is already chal on the people carrying this animal the moment they left Azar. V'gufa minolon, and how do you know that this halacha is that you have to take it out of three machnas? Where do you see by Parkrai Mashiach that it's got to be taken out from all three machnas? The Tana Rabbanan. It says v'hoitzi es kol hapar al michutz lamachna, which only says one machna. Chutz l'gimel machnas atoim. Chutz l'gimel machnas. It means three machnas. Atoim and chutz l'gimel machnas. Or any ele machnachas. Who said it's three machnas? Maybe it's only one machna. Zok to Gemara. Kishu oimer papara eda michutz l'machna. It also says michutz l'machna by para eda, and it didn't need to say it because it already says by para eda. Follow all the rules by the Par Kohen Mashiach and duplicate them with the para eda. So why did the Torah have to say by the para eda as well? Michutz l'machna. Shein tzarich leimar. Sharei kainamar kasher sarif is a para rishon. We already said that it has the same halach as a Par Kohen Mashiach. So why does the Torah have to give the specific detail of michutz l'machna? Litin loy machna shniya. That tells you don't go to one machna, you go to two machnas. But there's a third time where the Torah says there, going what's l'machna. That's in the parsha of Trumas Hadeshin. It doesn't have to say michutz l'machna. You know why? Sharei kfar nemar al shefach hadeshen yisarei. We already know where the Shevach Hadeshin is. So why did the Torah have to tell us that it's Michutz L'Machana? Again, leading L'Machana Shlish, to tell us that all of these items have to be taken to be burnt out of the three Machanas. Means out of Gazara, out of Arbais, and all the way out of Yerushalayim. For Rab Shimon, Hai Michutz L'Machana, my Ovidly, Rab Shimon, who in our Mishnah says that you don't become Tomei when you leave the Azara, you become Tomei while you're burning the animal. So, what is he going to learn from the pasuk of Michutz L'Machana? Never can Chutz L'Machana, the Never La'alan Chutz L'Machana. La'alon, I believe, is by the Para Aduma. To tell us the following: Ma La'alon Chutz L'Machana, just like by the Para Aduma is taken out of all three Machnos. Afkan, so too by the Parman Esrofim, they have to be burned Chutz L'Shalosh Machnos. But where? Umal Alon L'Mizrachish Yerushalayim. Just like the Paraduma, we burn it where? On the Har HaZeisim, which is east of Har HaBayis. So too, let's turn over the Daf onto Daf Kuf Vov. Look, Avkan L'Mizracha Shel Yerushalayim. This also has to be L'Mizracha Shel Yerushalayim. So where do you burn all these parim, including the paraduma, on Har HaZeisim? Elul Rabbanan, according to Rabbanan, Heichi Saraf Lahu. How do you know where it has to be burnt? We're not learning. We don't have the limit of paraduma because he's using the Chutz L'Machana to teach you that you don't become tamei until you leave the Azara. Kidatanya. I'll tell you where he holds that you burn it. Heicha Nisrafin. Where are these parim and Nisrafim, Musirim and Nisrafim? Where are they burnt? L'tzafan Yerushalayim, to the north of Yerushalayim. Chutz L'Shalosh Machnos. Vosep is the north. So Rashi Shakol Ma'isa Chatas B'Tzafan. We know that the Chatas is always brought on the Tzafan. So this is no different. The Chutz L'Machana to the north. I believe that's like towards Mount Scopus, towards our Tzayvim, I think, if I have my geography right. Chutz L'Shalosh Machnos. Rabbi Yosy Glili Amar. Rabbi Yosy Glili says Abeis Hadeshen Nisrafim. They're all burnt by the Beis Hadeshen, as Rashi says. Tzorach Sheyaktim L'Shem. Oh, a Beis Hadeshen Tzorach Sheyaktim L'Shem Deshen. Mizbeach Sheyei Nikra Koydem L'Ched Mokem Shefach Hadeshen. We said that where do you burn it? By the Shefach Hadeshen. Where do you burn the Noisar? You burn it, or the Tuma Hadeshen. You burn it by the Shefach Hadeshen. You know what we learn from there? We learn from there that where you burn these animals, you can't burn it on a fresh plot of land. There has to be a place where there has already been deshen burnt there. Amar Rav Montana, the Polygalid of Yosy, who argues in Yosy. So Amar Rav Eliezer ben Yaakov, Rav Eliezer ben Yaakov. The Tanya al Shevach Hadeshen Yisaref Shehei Sham Deshen. There has to be deshen there from before. Rav Eliezer ben Yaakov argues and says Shehei Mekaymoy Mishupach. It has to be on an inclined piece of property where things will roll off. That's what he holds. So he's arguing on Rav Eliezer ben Yaakov. Rav Eliezer ben Yaakov said, I'm sorry, he's arguing on Rabbi Yosy Glili. Rabbi Yosy Glili said there had to be their deshen before. And Rav Eliezer ben Yaakov says, no, it doesn't mean that to be deshen before. It means it has to be on an incline. Amar Abaye, who said that Rav Eliezer ben Yaakov is arguing Rabbi Yosy Glili. Maybe he also agrees you have to have deshen there before. Maybe he just says you need an additional requirement. They're arguing about whether or not you have to have Mekayim Meshupach. But everybody agrees that it has to be a place that was once used for deshen. Gewalt. Zog to Gemara weiter. We're going to come in and finish the pair. Tanur Badan. HaSoyref Mitama Begodim. Who becomes Tameh? The Soyref. This is, of course, the sheet of Reb Shimon, who holds that you don't become Tameh right when you leave the Arzara, but you only become Tameh when you're being Oisik in the Shreifa. Even the person who lights the fire, he's not the person who becomes tamei. The person who's oisik and actually burning the para. The person who's arranging the wood on the fire that they're burning it on, he doesn't become tamei either. So what does qualify as a soyref? Who will become tamei according to Reb Shimon? someone who's actually involved in assisting during the actual shreifa. Correct Gemara. At what point is the shreifa considered over? Yochel af mishanatsu efer mitama begodim. You might think even though everything is completely burned, it will still be mitama. However, oisam mitamin begodim. Only while the animals are still intact, while they're burning, they're mitama begodim. But once they're efer, once they're ash, they're not mitama. Umishanas and efer ein mitamin begodim. However, Shimon Omer oisam mitamin begodim. Mitei chabosar ein mitamin begodim. Now, Mishnah Shimon didn't say efer. He said if it's merely ois meat, if it's gone the meat, it's from mitamin begodim. My binai, what's the difference between efer and bosar that's not gone, that's not there anymore? What happens if the meat is hardened so much it's like a coal already? That's not efer. But according to Reb Shimon, that's nitei chabosar. According to Reb Shimon, once the animal is hard like a coal, once the meat that's being burnt is hard like a coal, anyone who's oisik with it will not become tummy anymore. But the Tanakama holds the person being oisik even in a hard like a coal meat would be mitama begodim until it turns into ashes. Baruch Hashem, we were zoicha to finish the 13th parak of, actually 12th parak of Zevachim. Everyone should have an awesomely wonderful day.